I kid saying the biggest deficit this country has today is a leadership deficit.
Yeah.
We have too many laggards and not enough leaders.
We've been doing this for 20 years and serving hundreds of families. We're going to bring solutions to your situation.
How do you choose a financial advisor? How do you know who you should
That's
work
the
with?
value of that 210 core, moving everything towards a purpose on purpose.
Welcome to Your Retirement Blueprint Podcast, the show that empowers you to live your best financial life. My name's Kendall Stahl. I'm the host. I'm joined here with my co-host, Mr. Phil Cooper, and we're kicking off season 2 with a bang. Mr. Phil, why don't you tell us who our guest is?
I am really excited. David Walker is with us today. David is the former Comptroller General of the United States of America, and to have him in our office today, to say it's an honor, David, is an understatement. So thank you for your travels. Thank you for your time away from your family, and to come and share with us your experience and your insight on where we're headed in our country. And so, yeah, it's an honor to have you today.
Great to be with the both of you.
Well, thank you very much.
First time I've been in this area of Illinois.
Well, welcome.
Lots of corn and lots of soybeans.
We have lots and lots of corn as far as the eye can see. And right now it's corn season. They're harvesting corn, they're harvesting beans. And so around here, this is exciting times. There's festivals, there's harvest festivals and things going on. Kendall's family's in the farm industry, and that's exciting times for them. Yeah.
Spend my weekends picking corn. So we just wrapped it up last night, actually.
Yeah, good times. Yeah, but again, Dave, seriously, Dave, thank you for being here, and thank you for your efforts and for the message you're trying to bring to our country. It's appreciated.
Let's start off lighthearted. Does that sound good?
That sounds good to me.
Well, we know you've spent some time with some presidents, right, in the past?
Well, I've been appointed by 3 different presidents of different political parties, yes.
So tell us, which one was the most fun, or which one did you like the best?
My favorite president was Reagan, because Reagan was driven by a short list of priorities. He had a set of core values that guided his decision-making. He hired really good people. He delegated responsibility and authority. He was an outstanding communicator.
Yeah, he was.
He had the ability to bring people together. If you recall, the Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate when he was president. And he would work with Tip O'Neill, who was Speaker of the House, and others to try to get things done. And so I think he was a model president. And each one had their strengths and weaknesses. What I can tell you is that with the issue of fiscal responsibility, is how do we put our finances in order? The last fiscally responsible president was Bill Clinton, and we haven't had one since.
Am I right in remembering that he was the last president to balance a budget?
He was. And in fact, the first 4 years that I was Comptroller General, we had a surplus. And 2 of those 4 years, we actually paid down debt. And I remember in 2000, the chairman of the Federal Reserve testified before Congress that he was worried. And they asked him, well, why are you worried, Mr. Chairman? I'm worried because we may pay off all the national debt.
Can you imagine?
At that point in time, it was projected that we were going to have surpluses as far as the eye could see. Well, I testified as well, and I said, I'm not worried about that at all. I know how this
problem solved.
And in 2003 is when I really got worried, because 3 things happened in 2003 that told me that Washington was out of control. Second round of tax cuts didn't come close to paying for themselves, just charged at the credit card. Invaded a sovereign nation without declaring war under false pretenses, cost thousands of lives and trillions of dollars. That was Iraq. Left a void in the Middle East that we're feeling the effects of today. And our son fought in Iraq as a Marine Corps captain. He's fine. And then we added prescription drugs to Medicare. That added $8 trillion in new unfunded obligations for Medicare when Medicare was already underfunded $19 trillion.
And that was just 20 years ago.
And that was just 20 years ago, all in 1 year.
Unbelievable.
It was a
Things
big
changed
So
a
do you
little
remember?
since then.
Yeah.
Do you happen to remember the number of what the national debt was in 2003?
Oh, not off the top of my head.
I'm going to say maybe 5 trillion.
I think it was about 5 in 2000, and now we're about 33.
Unbelievable.
But here's the issue: the 33 is just the tip of the iceberg. Because when you add unfunded civilian and military pensions, retiree health care, Social Security, Medicare, The real number as of the end of last fiscal year, which was September 2022, was over 120 trillion. So like an iceberg, what people like to talk about is the tip of the iceberg, but what sinks the ship is what's underneath. And a lot of those are off-balance sheet obligations.
Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of Kendall's agenda here, but I think this would be a good place for an interject a question about that. So if we've got 120 trillion or whatever the number is, what I'm concerned about, there's a lot that I'm concerned about with that, Dave, but the thing that I'm concerned most about is if you turn on the nightly news, the average rank and file American here's million, billion, trillion, and it ranks in their mind. It's the same number, but there's a massive difference between millions and trillions. Can you put into perspective maybe some kind of an illustration that explains what does 120 trillion actually mean?
Well, you're talking about, and I'm going to get into the exact numbers tonight when we have our event tonight. You're well over $300,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country. I'm talking about the 120 trillion.
Yeah.
You're probably about a million and a half per household in America.
So you're saying we all would have to write $1.5 million check per household,
and it would have to clear. Which is a problem, but median household income in America
can't support that.
Is about
$70,000. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the numbers don't work.
No,
and that number and the related hole is getting deeper, and the number is growing faster than the economy, primarily due to known demographic trends, healthcare costs, and now the fastest growing expense for the federal government is something we get nothing for. It's called interest.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary.
It is. We don't get anything for it. So the normal, like Phil kind of brought up, the normal retiree, pre-retiree, right, in Central Illinois. We talked about states a little bit already and how Illinois is not much better at all.
Number 50.
Number 50.
And hopefully not
Congratulations. We did it.
Good job, Illinois.
We're there, yeah.
There's only one way to go, and that's up.
What do we say to them? Like, as you know, we meet with them every day. That's what our firm does, retirement planning for the normal individual. And so how can they help? What do they need to do to prepare? Like, those are big numbers that we talk about, numbers that aren't even comprehensible, I think, by a lot of folks. And so I think people start to gloss over them and say, well, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe we can just keep going,
Well, one of the things you have to do is drop a bunch of zeros, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you end up dropping a bunch of zeros and putting it into the territory where people can relate to the numbers, they get it better.
Yeah.
Okay. If you do it to per person, if you do it to per household, people get it better. The bottom line is that our debt as a percentage of the economy, which is the metric that really matters, okay, and interest as a percentage of the budget, those are the two. They're already too high and they're going up. All right. And so we're going to have to make some tough choices. We're not going to be able to grow our way out of this problem. We're not going to be able to cut our way out of this problem. We're not going to be able to tax our way out of this problem. We're going to have to do all three. And everything is not equal. We're going to have to reform the social insurance contract. That means Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Right now, Social Security is set to go to zero. I mean, the trust fund is set to go to zero in about 10 years. If we don't do anything, there's a 20% and increasing cut in everybody's benefits immediately. Medicare Part A is scheduled to go to zero quicker than that, all right, which is another problem. We're gonna have to reform those programs. We're gonna have to reprioritize, reduce discretionary spending, including defense, and we're gonna have to raise revenues. Tax rates today, individual income tax rates today, will never be lowered. Yeah. And anybody who tells you we can grow our way out of this problem would fail math. And anybody who tells you that we can just cut our way out of this problem doesn't understand political feasibility. Because in the end, you have to do something that works and that is politically feasible, that can pass the House, pass the Senate, get the signature of the president. Yeah. And that requires compromise, and compromise is not a bad word.
Yeah. Okay, so in your opinion, you've been to Washington for many years. You understand the political wranglings that go on there. Is it possible that we can have true fiscal responsibility, meaning we can raise taxes to a level that is fiscally responsible, and we can cut spending, and we can renegotiate the social contracts. Is that even a possibility?
It is, but we need two things. Number one, we need a statutory, by law, where the House buys in, the Senate buys in, the President buys in, a statutory fiscal sustainability commission comprised of capable, credible, and non-conflicted individuals who will go out and engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicit input, come back, make a package of recommendations, guaranteed up or down vote in Congress. In 2012, I did a 10,000-mile, 27-state national fiscal responsibility bus tour that was underwritten largely by the late H. Ross Perot Sr. May God rest his soul. And I proved the hypothesis that the American people are a lot smarter than the politicians realize. They're way ahead of the politicians. They're willing to accept tough choices if it's part of a comprehensive goal-based plan consistent with principles and values that bring people together rather than divide them apart. The second thing we need a constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
The debt ceiling is a bad joke. It hasn't constrained the growth of government. It hasn't constrained mounting debt burdens. Statutory approaches, that have been used in the past have not stood the test of time. The only thing that can bind current and future Congresses is a constitutional amendment. We don't need a balanced budget amendment. What we need is an amendment that will limit the growth of government and how much debt as a percentage of the economy we can take on. And I'm working on both of those right now.
Okay.
And the shocking thing is that there's two ways to get a constitutional amendment. The old-fashioned way, 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate,
3/4 of the state.
3/4 of the state ratify. And there's a second way. The founders were very smart people. Believe it or not, they thought that Washington might become so out of touch and out of control.
Wow.
And that there might be certain issues that they had a conflict, like term limits, like controlling spending, like campaign finance, that the states should have equal rights to be able to propose amendments. And if 2/3 of the states filed an application with Congress for a convention of states to propose one or more amendments, not to rewrite the Constitution, to propose one or more amendments, if they did that, if the majority of the states voted for something, they'd send it back to the states for 3/4 to ratify it. And guess what? In
We've been there.
1979, 39 states
We've been there.
had active applications.
So why no
and Congress did nothing.
Why no action? Well, who's accountable for that?
The Congress is accountable, and one of the things that I'm working on with a small group of patriots who all happen to be grandparents, which is, by the way, the best part.
The best thing, that's right.
Don't get
You
Phil
enjoy
started.
them, you spoil them, you exercise the put option. and
Right
give
here's
them
where
back.
we pause, and I bring my grandchildren's pictures up. This is
And that's one of the things that I do in a lot of my speeches, because it's about country and grandchildren. That's what it's about. I'm not worried about me. I'm not worried about my kids. I'm worried about my grandkids. But so the bottom line is we've already crossed the goal line. Congress did nothing. So a small group of us have worked together. We've got one state that's agreed to file suit against the Congress. We want to get one more. It'll be decided by the Supreme Court.
okay. Are you mentioning or referencing something like the Simpson-Bowles Commission that would start something like that?
Simpson-Bowles did good work, but there were several problems with Simpson-Bowles. Number one, it wasn't statutory.
Okay.
All right. So the Congress and the president didn't buy in up front. They had no guarantee that anybody would ever vote on their recommendations. Secondly, they did no meaningful citizen education engagement. That is the key to success. They basically came up with what they thought was a good idea. And then after they did that, they tried to go out and sell it rather than starting with the people. Okay. And then in addition to that, the threshold that you had to have in order to make recommendations was 3/4, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. Yeah.
Way too high.
Yeah.
So there are several things that you need to correct for. You need to learn from what's worked and what didn't work. And on Social Security, as an example, we reformed Social Security in 1983. You know why we reformed it in 1983? Because within weeks, the trust fund was going to go to zero and people's benefits were going to get cut across the board, which is not only inequitable, but politically unacceptable.
Do you think
so
that
they had to do it?
Do you think that's what's going to take this time again?
Well, I hope not. And that's why I think we need to do this mechanism that doesn't just deal with Social Security, but deals with the broader problem. Because quite frankly, Social Security is one of the easiest things to resolve. And we can talk about that if you want. But, we need to deal with much more than Social Security.
Why is it one of the easiest things to resolve? I think that's probably something that a lot of our listeners are concerned about. Like, we sit down with them every day.
We hear them all the time, don't we?
Yeah,
we hear it all the
they
time.
see it on their statement. It's going to go by 20% in 2035 or
Well, here's why.
it is.
Because if you ask seniors, they're concerned that their benefits are going to get slashed. That's not going to happen because A, it wouldn't be equitable, and B, it's not politically feasible. The most active voters,
Right?
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's kind of what I always
Right.
tell everybody. I'm like, I have a hard time believing that's actually going to happen because
And
that's
here-
political suicide.
And here's the second thing: younger people,
Yeah.
younger people don't think they're going to get it.
Yeah.
Literally, they don't think they're going to get it at all, and they're wrong because even if the trust fund went to zero, there's still about 80 cents on the dollar to be able to pay benefits, going down over time. So, and so therefore that means that you can reform the program, phase it in over time, and exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans. I mean, I call that a win.
Yeah.
But we
David,
have
that's
no
the first
leadership.
good news I've heard about Social Security.
Yeah, I know.
It is. And now here's the frustrating thing. Both major candidates for president have said, I'm not going to touch Social Security.
Yeah.
You know what my response is to that? Then you're part of the problem.
You don't have a,
Because
you don't have
if
a
you're not
choice.
going to touch Social Security, you are for a 20% plus cut
Reduction.
in benefits
Absolutely.
Yeah.
within
Absolutely.
10 years.
Yeah.
So we've got to change the terms of the debate. We got to hold these people accountable for failing to act, on large known and growing problems.
Wow. Well, Kendall has put together a really great agenda for this podcast that we have just completely not even followed.
No, this
at
is
point.
exactly what the agenda was.
So-
There was 4 questions
I'm really.
that would just tee all this up.
I was
and we're
thinking,
talking about
let
it.
just tee David up and let him go, and you and I just be the visitors on the show. This is good.
All right, here's my question. I think you're concerned about it too. You said you got grandkids. If you get Phil started on his grandkids, which are my kids, we'll be here all night.
Yeah.
So is there hope? Can we get it done?
Yeah, there's always hope, but let's just understand that Washington is very dysfunctional right now.
Yeah.
We still don't have a Speaker of the House.
Yeah, right.
And the degree of partisanship that exists today is about the greatest it's ever been.
Yeah.
My personal view is, I'm less concerned about partisan divides. I'm more concerned about ideological divides. I think what's going on right now is a battle over our future. And the battle is between the people who believe in the principles and values that this country was founded on that made us great. Things like limited but effective government, individual liberty, personal responsibility and accountability, rule of law, equal justice under the law, fiscal responsibility, intergenerational equity, stewardship. Those are founding principles. And the second set are socialist state principles: grow government, increase dependency on government, take control of education, take control of healthcare, don't worry about deficits and debt, and I can go on.
Yeah.
The last election in 2020, the Democrats basically won control, and they followed the socialist state principle.
Correct.
They also followed something called the modern monetary theory, which says that deficits and debt don't matter as long as you borrow in your own reserve currency, unless and until you have excess inflation. Well, the problem with that is it's contrary to history, contrary to long-established economic principles, based on a flawed comparison to Japan, and it's failed.
Yeah.
We did way too much spending. We had way too loose
And
monetary
inflation
policy.
happened.
Yeah,
That
inflation's
led
here.
to
Yes.
inflation. Okay.
Yes.
And now Americans since January of 2021 are paying 17% more
Yeah.
plus, for things than they did back then. So, and right now inflation's about 3.7%, which is almost double what the target rate is. But you can't forget about the 17 between January 2021 and now, right? So it's cooling off, but it's still a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, David, you've written a couple of books, one of which is America in 2040. I want to show that to our viewers and listeners. And if they haven't gotten a book of that, we'll have an opportunity for them to just give me a copy of this book. But in this book, you talk about some things that are pretty eye-opening. I'm just going to admit troubling at times, but you do present some solutions to it. You don't just state the problem. That's an easy thing. The news media can do that. They can state the problem, but you actually present some solutions. Can I ask you, in your own words, can you describe the title, America in 2040? Why 2040? What needs to happen for that to not be a number that we have to worry about? And I'm going to guess it's probably all the things you've already mentioned. We've got to do these things, these three things: cut spending and renegotiate social contracts and increase revenue. We've got to do all three of those things. But what else has to happen as an American citizen? Speaking to me as an American citizen, I'm a kid that grew up in the 70s and 80s. In my mid-50s, and I am not concerned about myself. I am extremely concerned about a 5 and 2-year-old grandchildren that I have. My children I'm very concerned with, but as you're speaking to me, grandfather to grandfather, what would you tell me? What bit of advice would you give to me to protect myself and my children for the next generation?
Well, let's start with the big picture, and then we can drill down. The book, American 2040, still a superpower, ?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
You want to go far enough out that there's still hope. Okay. And secondly, basically what it says is that there's an alliance of countries against the United States. I mean, I was ahead of the curve on this big time. I mean, the book also talks about how I predicted that Russia was going to go into Ukraine, and before they did. The alliance of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and several other countries. They are aligned against U.S. interests economically, diplomatically, militarily, and culturally. And there's lots of examples that are talked about in there. In addition to that, when you talk about what it takes to be a superpower, the number one thing is economic power. If you don't put your finances in order, your economic power is going to go down. If your economic power goes down, your diplomatic influence goes down, the ability to fund a strong military goes down, and the desire of people to emulate you from a
you lose
cultural
leverage
standpoint goes down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is the leading indicator on the way up. It is the leading indicator on the way down. We're on a downward slope right now. Some of our rivals, in particular China, they have a plan. They have a plan that deals with all four of those dimensions that it takes to be a superpower, and they're executing on that plan. And one of the key aspects of it is the Belt and Road Initiative. It's not perfect by any means, but if you don't have a plan, all you have is prayer. I'm for prayer, but I'm for prayer and a plan.
Yeah.
We have no plan, okay? And so therefore, what I lay out in there is here are the challenges that we face. And, and I like to address things in three orders. One, wake-up call. We got to make changes.
Yeah.
Call to action.
Yeah.
And then a way forward. And the book does include a number of ideas about how we can address these challenges. And importantly, for the fiscal challenges, things like taxes, Social Security, Medicare, defense, et cetera, the ideas that are in there are the ones that I got from that 2012 National Fiscal Responsibility Bus Tour, where I got 77 to 97% agreement on specific reforms from representative groups of voters that would diffuse the ticking debt bomb and create a better future for ourselves. So the other thing I do is I try to lead by example and practice what I preach. And so, I know that tough choices are going to have to be made on Social Insurance. I know that taxes are going up. I know that with uncertainty, you get more market volatility. All right. I know that there's a risk that the dollar is going to end up, not being as dominant with regard to reserve currency. And so I've tried to make changes myself in my own financial planning to try to mitigate the risk. And I'll talk about some of that, tonight, and some of that's talked about in the book. But so the two things you have to do is you have to take care of yourself and your family.
You have to make it a plan.
You have to make a plan, execute on the plan with qualified independent professionals, okay? And you need to put heat on your elected representatives who are failing to do their job.
Okay, let me interrupt you right there because you
said
said something a minute ago I think is really worth diving deep here. You have 77 to 97% buy-in from the American people, the ones that you have polled and been involved in. Is it a fair assumption to say that our division in this country is not at the American citizen level, it's at the political level?
That's correct.
So the American citizens, we see them every day.
Yeah.
And we do not market, if you will, to a specific demographic or a specific political bent, anything like this. And everyone that sits in front of us, I would say that we can politically get along at some level. We'll find middle ground. The
Right.
division is not in the American citizen. The division is in our politicians. And so
That's
we've got
correct.
to attack that issue as well.
Well, and political reforms is one of the things that's covered in the book. I mean, what we have right now, we have a republic, which, as you know, is a representative democracy. It's not a direct democracy. That is not representative of and not responsive to
So true.
the general public.
So true.
And there are several things that we need to do to deal with that. We need redistricting reform, where the purpose of redistricting reform is to maximize the number of competitive districts consistent with the Voting Rights Act. rather
Versus
than
what's actually happening.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
We need integrated and open primaries. Right now, almost 50% of registered voters are unaffiliated or independent, including myself. It's about 48 the last time I saw it. 27% Democrat, 25% Republican, and yet the duopoly, the Democrats and Republicans, want you to choose between them.
Yeah.
When in fact, they're close to being a minority of registered
Wow.
voters.
That's shocking to me. Okay.
In addition to that, we need ranked choice voting. Okay. We need campaign finance reform. And we need 12-year term limits. Those are some of the things. But, we may not need the term limits if we got all that other, because believe me, you'd have a very different Congress. You'd have.
When it's actually representative of the people, that would be
correct.
a tremendous difference.
That's correct. That's
Yes.
correct. And so there's a number of things we need to do in order to revitalize our democracy and to restore a republic that's truly representative of and responsive to the general public.
Thank you. That was good.
And by the way, I'm also one of the national co-founders of a group called No Labels,
Okay.
which is its themes are not left, not right, forward, results, not rhetoric, progress, not partisanship. Those are just a few of the themes. We were formed in 2010, Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated. We helped to form the Problem Solvers Caucus, 64 members in the House and the Senate, equally divided between Republican and Democrats, who worked together to get the infrastructure bill, to get the debt ceiling, get past the debt ceiling, and to get the CR. They're the only group really working together across the aisle. The bicameral group, which is Senate and House, working together to get things done that way. And we have a new announcement that if the Democrats nominate Biden, and if the Republicans nominate Trump, we may offer a third option to the American people, a third
Interesting.
unity
Okay.
option, because,
Okay.
and for the first time in the history of the country, we're in a situation where a third option might be viable, because 69% of the people don't want Biden and 62% of the people don't want Trump.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
And talking about the future, we're at or near an all-time record for people thinking that we're heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And the future for our children and grandchildren may not be as good as it was for us. That is downright un-American. That is downright un-American, and it is unacceptable.
That was one of the things I was going to ask you. Obviously, I'm a little younger than the two of you, so
Just a little.
just
Just
a little
a shade.
just
Yeah.
a shade little. So, my outlook is kind of doom and gloom right now, but I know there's been a lot of things in the past that have probably felt somewhat like this. Is that true? Have we been through things like this before and we've made it out and we've worked through it?
Well, Churchill says the Americans will ultimately do the right thing after they try everything else. Okay, democracy is messy. I mean, the bottom line is, if you're talking about the fiscal issues, taxes and spending and things of that nature, we're ultimately going to have to address it.
Yeah.
The question is, do we address it prudently in a timely manner, where we can avoid a major crises and phase things in, if you will, to minimize disruption, if you will, and maximize the ability to plan? Or do we wait until the stuff hits the fan?
Mm-hmm. We don't have a choice.
And then have to do dramatic things that have to be done immediately rather than phased in over time. And unfortunately, all too frequently, America is a lag indicator, especially with regard to our elected officials. They're a lag indicator. And that's the opposite of what we need. I kid saying the biggest deficit this country has today is a leadership deficit.
Yeah.
We have too many laggards
Mm-hmm.
and not enough leaders.
I couldn't agree with that more.
Just to piggyback off of a question there for Kendall about is, things have happened in the past and we can name those things, whatever they are. But it appears to me, and maybe my perspective needs to be readjusted, but it would appear to me that the things that have happened in the past, we as an American people were able to find a way through that because we had a clear objective of making things better for those coming behind us. It seemed like that.
Stewardship.
That's a wonderful word. And I think that's where I want to go with this. So my grandparents were Great Depression folks, and they knew what it was like to come together and serve your neighbor. They had nothing. Let's give them what we have. We have nothing. They'll give us what they have. There was a commonality of helping your neighbor do those things. And fast forward to my mom and dad, they were very blue collar, put your work boots on and get it done every day kind of people. And they taught that to us kids. So much so that I remember growing up in the neighborhood in central Illinois, small town USA, and being out in the yard in the summertime and doing things that maybe a kid shouldn't have been doing. And the neighbor lady coming and getting us and swatting us on the behind and sending us home. And what did my parents do when we got home? They swatted us because the neighbor gal had to swat us. It wasn't this finger pointing. It wasn't all that. It was everyone having a common approach to making things better for their little world right there. And I wonder if the little bit of that has been lost. And I wonder how much social media and the news media plays into that, where everyone now has a platform. You can be pretty brave behind a screen. You can have an opinion. And I'm wondering, is the American people, you mentioned earlier that you've got this 70 to 90% buy-in rate. I'm wondering, are we as divided as what the media wants us to be?
We're not as divided as it appears. The problem is that if you take social media, people can say things and do things on social media.
No accountability. Yeah.
There's no accountability. They would never do it to your face.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right?
very brave behind the screen.
And that's a problem. The other thing is if you look, I remember back when I was a kid, you had 3 major networks.
Yeah.
Right? And Walter Cronkite. There is
Walter
Cronkite.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
You know, the news would be a half
We
hour.
should pause and explain to Kendall who Walter Cronkite is.
Walter Cronkite, I'm going to help you here. Walter Cronkite was the lead national news correspondent for CBS News.
Mm-hmm.
And the news was a half hour at night, okay? And it was the news.
Yeah.
It wasn't opinion, okay? And Walter Cronkite would give you the news. He didn't give you opinion. But one time he did give opinion, and that was during the Vietnam War, when his comments on the Vietnam War caused LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, to say, "If I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost America."
Wow.
And he decided not to run for re-election.
Sure.
Okay. Now we have multiple media outlets. And most of those media outlets don't report the news.
Yeah. Okay.
Most of those media outlets are slanted to the left or the right. They're more about opinion than they are the news. And people self-select where they want to get their information from. Okay. Candidly, if you want to get the best international news and a different perspective on the United States, you probably want to go to the BBC. Okay. If you want to get the best financial news, you probably want to go to The Economist. Okay. Because in the U.S., things are so fragmented, if you will, in the Financial Times, they're so fragmented. But when you really deal directly with the American people and you give them the facts and you tell them the truth, and you also provide something called contextual sophistication. See, one of the things that you get from the media and you get from politicians a lot, they'll tell you something that's technically accurate, but grossly misleading.
Way out of context. Yeah.
And let me give you an example. Let's talk about Ukraine, for example. Like, I just went to an event 2 nights ago and the ambassador to Ukraine was there and her military attaché. We're now debating about Ukraine and what are we going to do about Ukraine. My opinion, we ought to support Ukraine. However, we should not write a blank check.
Mm-hmm.
We should do our fair share and not more than our fair share. And for too many years, we've been treated like Uncle Sugar and we've been the dupe. Okay. And so my view is that what we ought to do is we ought to say, tell you what, we're going to support you, but we're going to match what the Europeans give you. So you go start talking to the Europeans to give you more money, and we'll match it, okay?
Sure.
Because what's happened is that we've given a lot more than they have collectively with regard to not just military aid, but economic assistance and things of that nature. And yet you hear some politicians, that I won't mention by name to protect the guilty, But but you hear some politicians say, "Well, there are 11 or 12 countries that have given a higher percentage of their GDP than we have." Well, that may be true, but they're small, dinky countries.
When you're the largest
I mean,
economic engine in the world, that doesn't mean a lot.
I mean, what about France? Well, what about Italy? What about Germany? Cut me a break, right? So, and when you look at Europe in the aggregate, it's about the same as the United States. So we ought to pretty much be at parity, right? So yes, but right, and let's tell people the truth.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I think before we wrap up, you kind of brought it up earlier. Our firm, we were talking about solutions to these problems, right, at the individual level. So our firm, we're big believers in having a plan, right? We cover the different areas, financial planning, right, income planning, investment planning, tax planning. So we're big believers in the tax planning piece of it, which I think I would imagine you would agree with, right?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I have a several year plan. I look at about 5 years.
Yep.
On what I'm going to do, and including things like Roth conversion.
You're talking about your personal plan.
Oh yeah, my personal plan. Yeah, I do. And also with regard to charitable giving, donor trust and things of that nature. So yeah, I think
taxes are coming. Have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, tax rates are never going to be lower than now.
I agree.
Ever.
They're on sale. Yeah,
and that's different than what we were told our whole life. We were told our whole life is that you're going to pay a lower effective tax.
As soon as you retire, your taxes go down.
Oh
yeah, not working out
At
so
least you
well.
don't have to pay social insurance taxes unless you're self-employed.
Yeah. We won't talk about that right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Gotcha. Well, good deal. Well, thanks for coming today and sitting down and talking with us. We're excited for tonight. We just appreciate you being generous with your time, and we were glad to have you on our show today. The last thing that we always do on our show is talk about what happened this week in history. So some of these things, they're just comments. So this week in history, 1987, Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted nearly 23%, largest one day.
And I have a comeback for that. Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. Well, that's
Black
it.
Monday. That was Black Monday.
Yep. That was one of the things that happened this week in history. Albert Einstein arrives at the U.S. as a refugee from Nazi Germany. Martin Luther King wins the Nobel Peace Prize. So those are the things that happened.
This week in history. Interesting.
If my memory is correct,
Okay.
I was confirmed unanimously by the Senate as Assistant Secretary of Labor for ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, on that day.
Really?
Right? And
Coincidence? I think not.
And the market immediately stabilized and started to
Immediately stabilized and started to recover.
Thank you for saving the world, David. Thank you for saving the world.
I'm not saying there was a correlation, but that is factually accurate.
Oh my! Well, on that note,
That's good.
Phil mentioned earlier you can get David's book. We'll link it in the show notes below. Thank you guys for joining us today, and don't forget we'll have another show coming up shortly. Thanks for joining Your Retirement Blueprint podcast. We'll see you next time.